USSR. So that was the end of Bombacci's career as an active communist. But before we continue on with his life, let's go back to that original dispute that caused both Bombacci and Mussolini and countless other socialists to split from the Marxist styled communism, and that is the question of nationalism versus internationalism. This is still a dividing factor among socialists. I am a quote unquote socialist who is a nationalist, and there are plenty of socialists out there who, on the other hand, are internationalists. Now, when my outer self hears internationalist and nationalist, my inner self hears Jewish and Gentile. Let me explain why. First, you have international capitalism, which is largely Jewish dominated, and especially the philosophies of the universal market and the worldwide consuming communities. The ideologues promoting these ideas are heavily Jewish. My video on the great Werner Sombart book, The Jews and Modern Capitalism, details the rise of Jewish power in capitalism for any of you doubters out there. On the other side, you have Marxism and its concept of the borderless working man. Now, unlike it's claimed quite frequently online, Marx was not a part of some solely Jewish conspiracy for internationalism. After all, he did write essays damning the Jews. He wrote essays where he said things like, "What is the worldly raison d'etre of Jewry?" And raison d'etre means the most important reason. The practical necessity of Jewry is self-interest. What is the worldly religion of the Jews? It is the petty haggling of the hawker. What is his worldly god? It is money. The Jews have emancipated themselves in a Jewish fashion. Not only have they mastered the power of money, but with or without Jews, money has become a world power. The Jews have emancipated themselves by turning Christians into Jews. Now, what he's speaking on, you can find in my video on Otto Weininger and the Spiritual Jew. And this is exactly what he's referring to is the spiritual Jew. The Jews have emancipated themselves by turning the Christians into Jews. Not literally, not converting them to Judaism, but if you watch the video You Gentiles and see the innate natural differences between Jews, this is exactly what they're doing. And this is what modernity is. This is at the foundation of modernity as Jewish intellectualism and in essence, making Gentiles more Jewish, adopt more Jewish values. And this is the lion's share of modernity. And anyone speaking on modernity that does not address the Jewish influence in the largely overproportionate Jewish hand is will never get to the bottom of the problem and is not addressing the problem intellectually honestly. They're not. And it's either because they're afraid of being called something or they haven't taken the time to dig into it for themselves and to see for themselves. And they just quickly dismiss it because that's the in vogue thing to do. But let's continue on. Marx also says, "Money is the most zealous god of Israel, and no other god can compete with him. Money debases all human gods and turns them into goods. Money is a universal value of everything." Now, despite his awareness of the heavy hand of Jewish influence in capitalism, and once again, we don't even need to look to Gentiles about all these things. You can read You Gentiles written by a Jew. You can look at Marx's own word by a Jew speaking about Jewish capitalism and their influence and their dominance. Everyone knows it and everyone sees it. Anyone that doesn't acknowledge it is a fucking liar, a hypocrite, or a coward. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. You can't be ignorant in this day and age. But, well, you can be ignorant in this day and age, but you shouldn't. You should take the time to dig into it. And I don't mean visiting some shit show, Jew hater site that simplifies and dumbs everything down on the Jewish question, but really digging into it, really reading the great minds of history that have dissected this question. And there you will find more understanding of what's going on. You don't need to get caught in these false narratives of superpowered demon Jews running the world from a little secret office in the middle of some island, that no one knows about. That's idiots like that take the validation out of these important topics that need to be addressed, that people need to be aware of. But we go on. Despite Marx's understanding and speaking on Jewish capitalism, he was like Bobby Fischer. He was ethnically and biologically Jewish, and therefore he was subject to some of the Jewish peculiarities, uh, as Jewish philosopher Otto Weininger described. He spoke about these natural differences of Jews, and he goes into, like I said, the video goes into the spiritual Jew on Otto Weininger, and this is essentially what people are being turned into. And Otto Weininger states in his book, Sex and Character, to defeat Judaism, the Jew must first understand himself and war against himself. So far, the Jew has reached no further than to make and enjoy jokes against his own peculiarities. So let's assume Marx did not dig deep enough to understand at the root of his internationalism was the fact that he had generations of his rootless, nationless, nomadic ancestral lineage running through his veins. And for that reason, he could not comprehend the value of a nation. Not only of a nation, but a nation to be among nations. This longing, this feeling, this knowing of nationhood that came so natural to Gentiles, because now, let us not forget, for a long time Gentiles had lived and died, soiled and tilled, loved and fought on the same sacred dirt. There was a bond, a connection there. This was something Jews had to strive to learn. And those that didn't want to become more like their Gentile hosts, naturally, it's evolutionary strategy after all, right? Naturally started the process to make the Gentiles more like them. And thus we have modernity. And once again, this, when you look into it, this is a large factor into what modernity is. And it just simply can't be ignored. Simply can't be ignored. It needs to be addressed. The Jewish capitalist and communist intellectuals, and today you can add comedians, entertainers, activists, etc., all the people on that list largely promote the ideal of internationalism and nationless borders. And on top of all those Jews, add the millions, maybe even billions of spiritual Jews running around today that also believe in this silly shit. Oh man, there's no borders. They're just man-made lines, man. It's ridiculous. And this is why you even see all the people that have adopted quote-unquote communism become the most nationalists, because internationalism is a facade. It's something promoted by oligarchies because they want to turn us into a bland, consuming set of people with no roots. So we have no roots. The only way we'll identify ourselves by the products we buy. And this will make them super, super, super happy because it just increases their power and puts us more into servitude. Not only servitude to them, but to ourselves, because they feed on our vices. They feed on those low-hanging fruits, and they attack that. And that's all they're turning us into. Degenerate fat fucks addicted to porn and shit food and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is why you typically see Jews at the spear point of communism and capitalism, and Gentiles at the spear point of fascism and nationalism. It's no coincidence, my friends. It is no coincidence that it goes down like this. And this is exactly where we are today in world politics. Nationalism versus internationalism. But instead of just a divided group of Italian communists, we see a divided world. So the issue is even more toxic today than it was back in Bombacci's time. Now, speaking of him, let's get back to him. Let's get off this rant on internationalism. With the